we are recording. I just wanted to let everybody know that on September 22nd, it's a Tuesday, NEWRA is going to join with NUNIC again and do another elected officials meeting. You'll be getting a notice in the next few days. In October, we're looking to work with the City Council and host yet again with NUNIC a City Councilors meeting. We don't have a date for that set yet, but it will be in October. NEWRA has its election of officers next month. If anyone is interested in being considered, could you please email us at newra.board@gmail.com. I'll put that in the chat, and we'll get you in touch with the committee that's pulling that together. Some Zoom procedures. Everybody is muted. I have tried to unmute folks, and I don't know if we're going to be able to use the. Sorry, I'm gonna have to undo my other line so it doesn't keep ringing during this phone, this call. I don't know, we'll do questions through chat. I can open people's mics to let them ask questions. For some reason, I don't see the hand. I may not have that on the Zoom account. Raise your hand. The other thing is we have a very full agenda tonight. So when you ask a question, please be mindful that we want to let as many people ask a question as possible because there are so many interesting topics for folks in this neighborhood. So please ask a question, try to keep it to 30, 45 seconds, just so that we have time for everybody to participate. And we would greatly appreciate that. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. We'll do our best to answer you as soon as we can. Now I'd like to introduce you to Matthew Moran from the BPDA, who's the transit director, and Jack Halverson, who was with the BPDA, who was the transportation planner, and Matt Moran, who was the transit director at Boston Transportation Department. And they're going to talk to us about a bus lane on North Washington Street headed north. Gentlemen, shall I share my screen? I think you have slides, diagrams.
Yes, very brief presentation. So.
There you go.
I should be able to, I think if I could share my screen, if that would be okay.
I just did.
I think you're sharing your own screen.
I'm sharing my own screen. Okay.
Let me.
You all know how great I am at this. Hold on.
Let me try.
One at a time. You ready? Let's
Yep.
give it a shot. I don't see you to share.
Do you see Jack by any chance? He could share.
No, I do not. I see a whiteboard. I only see my screen. Let's try it one more time. I know. I'm getting all kinds of texts. I'll try it again. I do not see you, which is very strange. Okay, hold on, I'm getting some help. Enable screen, bottom security tab. Hold on. Enable screen sharing. Now, let's see if that worked. Nope. Yeah, I've got screen share clicked. Are you open to share?
Try. Look.
I don't see you yet.
There we go. I think I have it.
Okay. Nope. Dave Kubiak just started to share his screen.
So let me try and.
Dave Kubiak, unshare your screen. Dave, can you unshare your screen? I can't close this. I'm going to close it. We'll try again. Dave Kubiak, you need to unshare. Okay, let's try this again.
I have it. Let me try.
Hey, you got it. Thank you.
All right, perfect.
Terrific, thanks.
Thank you very much. Cheryl, as Cheryl mentioned before, my name is Matt Moran. I work for the Boston Transportation Department, joined by my colleague Jack Halverson, who works with the Boston Planning and Development Agency. And then I also want to recognize John Romano from our Office of Neighborhood Services. So thank you everyone for your time tonight. Really appreciate this. I'll be as brief as I can with this presentation. Two things to start off. We really want to hear your voice, your input, because that will really help to shape this project, make it better, and let us know what our path forward can be or should be. Second thing, I was told to emphasize this, we are not proposing to change any parking regulations, so no parking loss will be associated with this project necessarily, unless that's the direction that this community wants us to go in. So I will sort of give a brief agenda, talk a little bit about who's leading this effort, what are Healthy Streets Boston, a little bit about project orientation, some project details, and then leave time for any questions or discussion. So what is the project leadership? So this is truly a collaboration between the City of Boston and the MBTA. So as many of you know, we, the city, operate the roads, the signals, sidewalks, curbside regulations. The MBTA operates the bus services. So by working together with the team, we can create a much better transportation network for sort of all users on the road. We are, of course, doing this in collaboration with a few other city agencies. I won't go through all of them here, but you can see them on your screen. If you have any questions sort of about a specific agency's participation, I can get into that in the question and answer session. So a little bit about Healthy Streets. So as many of you know, the City of Boston is working on a variety of bicycling, transit-related projects to improve social distancing and improve COVID recovery related abilities. So Healthy Streets is sort of the umbrella term for a lot of these initiatives, but for transit, we're working on bus lanes in Rosendale and actually here in the North End and on Columbus Ave in the JP Roxbury area. And why are we looking at specific corridors? So we're looking at specific corridors with higher COVID rates. So we're prioritizing projects that either serve communities directly or indirectly with higher COVID rates. In this case, it's Chelsea and to a lesser extent Charlestown. And we're also looking at this as a data-driven approach. So we're trying to look at corridors with higher enduring ridership. So corridors where more people have stayed on the buses, compared to pre-pandemic volumes. So what's the mission? So working together with the City of Boston, we can improve bus reliability throughout the city to enable better social distancing on transit services. By improving bus reliability, the MBTA can offer more bus trips and reduce passenger crowding. And bus lanes can also be used for specifically two other means. So improving Boston public school buses. So even if those schools aren't in session right now, they could be later in the fall or in the spring. So this would allow Boston public school buses to have a jump in priority. And then also police, fire, and ambulances can also use bus lanes. So we can use bus lanes to improve emergency response times to the communities that they serve. A little bit more in the plan context. So looking at this in terms of what are our complete street goals. So making streets more balanced, to provide more safety measures, to provide more ability to access key and essential services. Vision Zero, which really emphasizes reducing crashes, reducing fatalities on our streets, injuries on our city streets, with good design and things to slow cars down so there isn't as much speeding. And then Go Boston 2030, which is our city's transportation guide. It lays out a number of projects, and it also lays out policies to enhance and improve the transportation network to shift people away from single occupancy vehicles and really shift people more in the direction of more sustainable transportation modes. So what I'm sure you're all most interested in, which is what is the project. So we're looking at the corridor from Sudbury Street, which is a segment of Cross Street. So that's for buses that are exiting from Haymarket Station, coming up Sudbury Street, and then entering on Cross, and then going up to Causeway Street. So this is a regional transit corridor for the routes 92 and 93 that serve Charlestown, and the 111 that serves Chelsea principally. And we're also coordinating with a number of other connecting projects. So the 2 Bell Note Government Center Garage and the North Washington Street Bridge reconstruction. So why North Washington Street? So before the pandemic, and to some extent now during the pandemic, we know that there's a variety of delays that hinder bus operations. I'll also note on here, we've heard concerns among residents of speeding and vehicles that move too fast in the corridor. We also know that there's high enduring ridership on this corridor. So the overall MBTA system, specifically bus system, is carrying about 50% of its pre-COVID ridership. But the Route 111 specifically is actually up to its pre-COVID ridership numbers. So that's 13 to 14,000 bus riders a day if you combine it with the 92 and the 93 and a few of the other regional routes that use North Washington Street. So a huge number of people are on buses, and there's huge implications if people can't properly socially distance on buses. So what are the project details? As I mentioned before, we are not looking at right now any parking impacts. We are not looking to impact the bike lane. We're looking to use quick build materials like paint and signage, meaning that if there are changes that we need to make later, we can easily make them, scale back the bus lane, or add some other features in. We're looking at safety improvements such as speed reduction signage, and we're looking at monitoring the corridor. And I'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. So what are we looking at here? So we are looking at a condition with the bus lane where it would sort of mix with traffic on this little segment of Sudbury Street, merge onto Cross Street. And I'm not sure if you can see it because of the zoom sort of angle, but as it gets up to Stillman Place, cars could enter the bus lane to make a right turn or to get through the intersection. And once we get, Cooper Street, not Stillman Place, but once we get past the Cooper Street light, cars again can enter the bus lane to make a right onto Thatcher Street. We would also preserve that left turn onto Valenti Way. Cars that are continuing through the intersection would continue through in that center lane. And then for the last stretch leading up to the Causeway Street intersection, most general purpose traffic would continue along North Washington Street up to the light. During periods of heavier congestion, we would imagine a lot of cars will merge into the bus lane sort of for the last 250 feet of the bus lane. And what this does is it enables us to have roughly the same amount of throughput through that traffic light as we do today. But the buses would essentially be able to skip a lot of that queue and get up to the front of the line. And so what are the project impacts? So we're anticipating the buses will save 2 to 3 minutes at peak times, which essentially means that they will have a much more reliable trip in addition to just saving that time. The T also believes that they'll be able to add some extra trips given that better reliability and that ability to have buses save a little bit of time. A typical driver will see a minute or two of additional travel time along this entire stretch. So to put that into context, a standard radio station commercial is about 30 seconds long. So a typical driver will sit through an extra 2, 3, 4 radio station commercials along this entire stretch of road. So it's not a huge impact for a typical driver. We also believe that this will reduce speeding on North Washington Street because fewer lanes for cars to speed mean that you'll inevitably end up traveling as fast as your most prudent driver. And as I mentioned before, emergency vehicles and public school buses will be able to improve their travel times as well. I mentioned before, we are anticipating that if this is implemented, we will have a monitoring plan. So we will go out and we will observe not only North Washington Street and Cross Street, but also Endicott Street, Commercial Street, and Causeway Street to observe what conditions are like now, where vehicles are starting to back up, and really get like a sense of how the operations are working this fall before any implementation happens. We will then monitor on a bi-weekly basis what conditions are like. So we will go out there during both the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour, observe conditions, and look at where cars are, backing up to, if there's enough time in the light cycle. We'll look at speeds. We'll work with our engineering department to determine if speeds have increased or decreased as a result of this. And of course, we'll look for community feedback. So we'll want to hear from Cheryl and everyone else in this group about whether this is working or not working. What we can do then is come back in early 2021 and make adjustments. So if something's not working, we can change the striping, we can change the signage, we can make modifications, because as I said before, this is a relatively straightforward type of project. It's paint, it's signage, so we can make these changes if things aren't working. Consider it almost like a proof of concept trial. And then once things happen where we're getting back to normal, we either have a vaccine and people are returning to work, or there's some other type of increase in travel, we'll return to this group, if it's a year from now or whenever, to see if things are working out well and make modifications at that point too, once volume has gone back to its pre-pandemic levels. So in short, that's really the monitoring plan that we're hoping for. We'd love your feedback on that plan, but then also all the other elements of this project. So very briefly, I'll conclude. So I think the next steps moving forward, we're going to conclude the public and stakeholder engagement. So continuing to hear back from this group and any other community members that want to comment on this project. We'll confirm project details at that point. So signage, striping, light cycle timing, all that sort of engineering related stuff. And then we'll look to potentially implement this fall, again, pending feedback from the community. And we'll develop the monitoring plan and implement the monitoring plan once or if this project is implemented. So with that, I will open it up.
Yeah. Does anyone have questions? Let's try to do them through the chat to start. Questions? Question for you, Matt. I don't know if you can see the chat. Is the monitoring just counting vehicles, or will there be intersection cameras? I was knocked down by a hit and run at the corner of Causeway and North Washington intersection. No video record. This is from Christine.
Gotcha. So our traffic cameras only record for a 24-hour loop, and that has a lot to do with state privacy laws. So we will be using traffic cameras from our traffic control center to help with the monitoring of the corridor and help to make any adjustments that we need to make. But we won't be recording and then keeping that camera footage, again, due to privacy considerations.
Any more questions? Nobody has any questions? After I spent time talking to Matt and Jack today, telling them that I thought everyone would have lots of questions in the chat. I'm sorry, I don't see the hand raising thing to open people's mics. So if anybody knows how to find that, please feel free to let me know.
And the other thing too is if you have a question now that something comes up later, my email's at the bottom left part of the screen. So feel free to shoot me an email. John Romano too, I know.
Yeah, and you put it in the chat. Another question, can we hear more about the schedule?
Sure. So we are obviously hearing community feedback now. Hopefully, assuming that this meeting goes well, we'll be meeting again next week. If both of these go well, we'll look to refine design by the end of the month, so by the end of September, and then potentially implement this in October. But really, the implementation schedule will be determined by the community feedback we receive.
Okay, Dave Kubiak has a question. Dave, you're unmuted.
Yeah, temporarily there was a bus lane along the parking lane at certain times, and your photos early in the presentation seem to show buses utilizing that parking lane as a bus lane. Utilizing the parking lane will remove some parking spaces, but they may be able to be accommodated somewhere else close by. Putting the buses into the travel lane forces riders to cross the bike path in order to get onto a bus. Is that correct? and it also takes away or impedes one of the traffic lanes. Now, during this pandemic, there may not be as much traffic, but before the pandemic, it was often very difficult to get out of the tunnel, the East Boston Tunnel, Sumner, I guess it is. It was often difficult to get out of the Sumner Tunnel at that cross street intersection because traffic was backed up along North Washington Street. So putting buses into a travel lane could worsen that situation. So I'm surprised you're not using, for those reasons, I'm surprised you're not using the parking lane. The other question is, and you may have raised this, are you doing something with the left-hand turn at Medford?
Sure, so there's a few things there. Let me make sure I wrote them down. So if I didn't catch them all, please let me know. But first on the design, you're sort of correct that the pictures we showed were from the other side of the street. So that's the inbound bus lane that already exists. So that's the bus lane that sort of took the parking lane and was using that. Again, that's the inbound side. The outbound side are heading towards Charlestown. We are proposing using the right travel lane instead of the parking lane. And as you alluded to, the T last year when they were doing shuttling for the Orange Line shutdown, used the temporarily coned off the bike lane and the parking lane to use that for busing. So it's a little bit different of a design, but I think it's better because we can preserve parking and we can preserve the bike lane as it currently exists today. But it won't, and it'll have sort of the effect of slowing down traffic by reducing the number of lanes on the street. There was the other question about bus stops. So buses will continue to make a bus stop along the curb just like they do today. So if you can follow my cursor here, a bus coming northbound or heading towards Charlestown will enter the bus lane right here. The bus stop is just south of Thatcher Street, so the bus will pull over to the curb, stop at Thatcher Street, and then merge back into the bus lane after Thatcher. So it'll do sort of just what it does today. And then your third point, I think, was about traffic. So I think you're absolutely right. If traffic levels return to where they were before the pandemic, we want to be prepared for that. And so we are proposing a monitoring plan to assess the conditions both in the immediate aftermath of this potential implementation. So again, looking at like, how is this working out with the current traffic volumes that are substantially lower than they were before the pandemic. But then also, once traffic starts to return to normal pre-pandemic levels, we will look at what's working on the corridor, what's not working on the corridor, and make modifications based on input from community groups, from engineering experts, to the bus lane design or the signage plan. So yeah, to your point, we don't know exactly what the future looks like, but we definitely want to be prepared to make those modifications if it comes to that. And then last but not least, you mentioned the Medford Street turns, which I believe this is Medford Street right here. And I'm sorry if this isn't 100% clear.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. So we aren't proposing any changes to that left turn, but certainly open to it. So if there's a general desire for modifications to that left, please let me know and we could look into it.
I believe you're going to have to limit that left turn, at least during the hours that buses are in that lane. It's already it backs up traffic, that lane, all the time. And it's just going to be much worse if there's only one travel lane at that point for cars.
I could be wrong about this, and I'd have to circle back with the folks that were on the North Station Area Action Plan, but I think there was a plan at one point to either reverse the direction of Medford Street or make modifications to Medford in general as part of that plan. So let me see exactly what was in those findings, and I can circle back with our engineers on that.
I've got a question from Joanne too, actually. Will the buses pull into the bus stop at Thatcher Street or stay in the bus lane? Will we get parking back at that spot? And also, the buses that travel in the bus lane southbound do not abide by the speed limit. Will the northbound travel lane have a speed limit?
Really good question. So To the point I mentioned earlier, buses will continue to pull in. They'll merge out of the bus lane. They'll pull into the stop up against the curb, just like they do today. And then once they leave, once everyone gets on, doors close, they'll merge over back into the bus lane. So it'll operate very similarly to how it does today. And then I apologize. Speeding. So we'll work with the MBTA and we'll flag that for them. I wasn't aware of the speeding issue for the inbound lane, but we'll make sure that is addressed, and we can post speed limit signs on the southbound side as well to make sure that T-buses abide by that 25-mile-an-hour rule.
All right, I think that's it. No more questions. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jack, very much for coming in tonight.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Thanks.
Have a great night.
Okay, you too. Thanks so much. Next up is the Chiafaro Group, and they're going to talk to us about their development plan for the Harbor Garage project. And we're going to share, I'm going to share my screen with you, Rob. Do you see it? And Rob, I unmuted you.
There we go. let me try to now share my screen with you.
While you're doing that, I have unmuted the other folks from the Chiafaro Group, Don Jr., Don Sr., and Steve Mitchell. You are all on, and